Welcome to Historian Diary. Today I will tell you a story about the Vatican, but this is not a story about faith or holiness or divine authority. This is a story about deception, about a woman who disguised herself as a man and became pope, about pregnancy, about giving birth in the middle of a papal procession, about a chair with a hole in it, used to check every new pope's genitals. This is the story of Pope Joan, and for 600 years people believed it was true. My hand is trembling as I read these medieval sources, written by monks, chroniclers, historians who swore this happened. Martin of Opava, Jean de Mailly, Giovanni Boccaccio. Dozens of medieval texts describing a woman who sat on the throne of St. Peter, who wore the papal tiara, who ruled the Catholic Church, and whose secret was revealed in the most public, most humiliating way possible, by going into labor during a papal procession in front of thousands of witnesses. This is the story of the female pope, the woman who fooled the entire Catholic Church, the pregnancy that exposed her, and the question that historians still debate: did this actually happen? Or is this the most persistent anti-papal propaganda ever created? Comment below where you're watching from, because what I'm about to tell you is either the most scandalous cover-up in church history or the most effective legend ever invented to damage papal authority. Let me start at the beginning. According to the medieval chronicles, the woman who became Pope Joan was born in the 9th century, around 814 CE. Different sources give different names. Some call her Gilberta, others Agnes, some John Anglicus, and many don't name her at all, just calling her the female pope. But they agree on the essential story. She was born in Mainz, Germany, to English parents. And from childhood she was brilliant, intellectually gifted, hungry for knowledge in a world that denied education to women. Her father was a missionary or a canon. He educated his sons but refused to educate his daughter. Knowledge was for men. The church was for men. Universities were for men. Women were supposed to be silent, obedient, focused on domestic duties. But according to the legend, this girl refused to accept that limitation. She listened to her brother's lessons, taught herself Latin, read theology in secret, and she fell in love with learning. The sources say she also fell in love with a man, a monk or a scholar, depending on which version you read. And this man recognized her intelligence, her potential, and when he had to leave for Athens to study, she made a radical decision. She would go with him, disguised as a man. Please subscribe to Historian Diary if you haven't already, because what comes next is a deception that lasted decades. She cut her hair, bound her breasts, dressed in men's clothing, took a male name, John Anglicus, John the Englishman, and she left Germany with her lover, traveling to Athens as a male student. In Athens, she studied at the schools: philosophy, theology, rhetoric, logic, all the subjects denied to women. And she excelled. She was so brilliant, so learned, so impressive in her theological knowledge that she gained a reputation as one of the finest scholars in Christendom. After Athens, according to the legend, she traveled to Rome, still disguised as a man, still John Anglicus. And in Rome she joined the church hierarchy, became a notary, then a cardinal. Her theological learning was so profound, her arguments so sophisticated, that she rose through the ranks of the church. Nobody suspected. How could they? Why would anyone suspect that this learned, bearded scholar was actually a woman? The sources describe her as having a deep voice, as being tall, as having masculine features that helped the disguise. Some say she grew a beard, or wore a false one. Others say she simply looked masculine enough to pass. But however she did it, she fooled everyone. For years, rising through the most male-dominated institution in medieval Europe. And then, in 855 CE, Pope Leo IV died. The Cardinals gathered to elect a new pope, and they chose the most learned, most respected, most theologically brilliant cardinal among them. John Anglicus, the English scholar who had studied in Athens, who knew theology better than anyone in Rome. The woman became pope, like this video right now, because what I'm about to describe is either historical fact or the most elaborate hoax in church history, and the evidence is complicated. According to Martin of Opava's Chronicle of the Popes and Emperors, written around 1265, more than 400 years after the event supposedly occurred, Pope Joan ruled for 2 years, 7 months, and 4 days. She took the name John VIII, though this creates chronological confusion because there was already a Pope John VIII later, from 872-882 CE. The sources aren't consistent about the papal name or the exact dates, but they agree on this. A woman sat on the throne of St. Peter, wore the papal tiara, celebrated Mass at the altar of St. Peter's Basilica, made theological pronouncements, issued papal bulls, governed the Catholic Church, met with emperors and kings, and nobody knew she was a woman for over 2 years. As Pope, leader of Christendom, a woman, in secret. The chronicles describe her as an effective pope, learned, wise, good at administration. There were no scandals during her papacy, at least not until the final catastrophic scandal that ended it. She governed well, which makes sense. She'd spent her entire life preparing for intellectual and theological work. She was qualified, more qualified than many male popes. She just happened to be a woman in an institution that absolutely forbade women from any church authority. But here's where the story takes its shocking turn. According to every version of the legend, Pope Joan had a lover. Some sources say it was the same man who helped her escape Germany, her original companion who knew her secret. Others say it was a cardinal who discovered her secret and blackmailed her into a sexual relationship. Still others suggest it was a servant or a chamberlain who stumbled upon the truth. Subscribe to Historian Diary and hit the bell, because this is where the medieval sources get explicit about sex, pregnancy, and the catastrophic exposure. Pope Joan, according to the chronicles, was having sex, in secret in the Vatican, while pretending to be a celibate male pope. The relationship was hidden, conducted in private papal chambers where only the most trusted servants could enter. And for a while the secret held until she got pregnant. Think about this situation. You're a woman who has disguised herself as a man for decades. You've risen to become pope, the most visible, most scrutinized religious figure in the Christian world. You're surrounded by cardinals, bishops, servants, officials. You celebrate public masses. You appear in processions. You're constantly watched, constantly visible, and you're pregnant. The sources describe how Pope Joan tried to hide the pregnancy. The papal vestments helped. They're elaborate, heavy, concealing. Multiple layers of fabric. She could hide the early stages. But as the pregnancy progressed, as her body changed, as the baby grew, she knew she was running out of time. Some versions of the legend say she planned to resign, to claim illness and abdicate, to disappear before anyone discovered the truth. She knew the pregnancy would eventually become visible, or worse, she would go into labor, and then everything would be exposed. But she didn't move fast enough, or perhaps she miscalculated how far along she was, or maybe labor came early. According to the chronicles, disaster struck during a papal procession through Rome. Comment below what you're thinking right now, because what happens next is described in vivid, shocking detail in multiple medieval sources. And it's either the most dramatic moment in papal history, or complete fiction designed to humiliate the papacy. Papal processions were common in medieval Rome. The Pope would process through the streets, riding a horse or in a litter, wearing full papal regalia, blessing the crowds. Cardinals and clergy would accompany the procession. Thousands of Romans would line the streets to see the Pope pass by. It was a demonstration of papal authority, papal connection to the people, papal blessing over the city. Pope Joan participated in one of these processions. The date, according to most sources, was sometime in 857 or 858 CE. The procession route went from St. Peter's Basilica toward the Lateran Palace, the papal residence at that time. The route passed through narrow medieval Roman streets. Between the Colosseum and the Church of San Clemente, there was a particularly narrow passage, and in that narrow street, surrounded by clergy, watched by thousands of Romans, Pope Joan went into labor. Jean de Mailly, writing in the 13th century, describes the moment. She was suddenly seized with labor pains and giving birth to a child, died on the spot. Martin of Opava gives more detail. While on her way from St. Peter's to the Lateran, between the Colosseum and St. Clement's Church, in the narrow lane she fell down in labor and gave birth. And immediately after, she died in that very place. Read that again. The Pope, in full papal regalia, on a horse, in a religious procession, in front of thousands of witnesses, went into labor, gave birth, in the street. The secret was exposed in the most public, most humiliating, most undeniable way possible. Not through investigation, not through accusation, but through biology, through the one thing that absolutely definitively proves someone is a woman. Childbirth. The chronicles describe chaos, the procession stopping, the Pope falling from the horse or litter, cardinals and clergy gathering around, confused, and then the realization, the horror, the shock. The Pope, the Vicar of Christ, God's representative on earth, was a woman, had been a woman all along, had deceived everyone, and was now giving birth in the street. Some sources say she died immediately after childbirth. Others say she and the baby were killed on the spot by the angry mob. Still others claim she was dragged to a dungeon and died there. The details vary, but all versions agree. Her papacy ended in that street, exposed by childbirth. Her decades-long deception revealed in the most dramatic way possible. Please share this video with anyone interested in church history or medieval mysteries, because what happened next is where the story gets even stranger. According to the legend, the Catholic Church was horrified, humiliated. A woman had been pope, had celebrated Mass, had governed the church, had sat on St. Peter's throne. This was catastrophic for papal authority. If a woman could be pope, if the cardinals could be fooled so completely, what did that say about divine guidance? About the Holy Spirit guiding papal elections? The sources claim the Church tried to cover it up, to erase all records of Pope Joan, to pretend it never happened. They removed her name from the official list of popes, destroyed documents, created the chronological confusion that makes dating her papacy so difficult. But they also, according to legend, took steps to make sure it could never happen. Again, the most famous of these preventive measures is the sedia, stercoraria, the dung chair or pierced chair. Multiple medieval sources describe a special marble chair with a hole cut in the seat. Before a new pope could be consecrated, according to this legend, he had to sit in this chair. And a junior cardinal would reach up through the hole and physically verify that the new pope had male genitalia. The cardinal would announce, "Duos habet et bene pendentes," he has two, and they hang well. Only then could the coronation proceed. This sounds absurd, like medieval urban legend. But here's the strange thing. Chairs like this actually exist. They're in the Vatican museums, marble thrones with holes cut in them. The Church's explanation is that they were ancient Roman bathing chairs, later used in papal ceremonies for symbolic reasons. But the legend of Pope Joan gave them a different explanation. Genital verification chairs, created because a woman once fooled everyone and became pope. Some medieval sources also claim that after Pope Joan, papal processions deliberately avoided the street where she gave birth. That narrow passage between the Colosseum and San Clemente became forbidden to papal processions for centuries, as a reminder, as a precaution, as an acknowledgement of what happened there. If you're still watching Historian Diary, thank you. Comment below. Do you think Pope Joan really existed, or is this anti-papal propaganda? I am a historian, and my job is to present what the sources say and analyze their reliability. So here's the evidence and here's the problem. The evidence for Pope Joan. Multiple medieval sources mention her. Martin of Opava's chronicle, Jean de Mailly's chronicle, Giovanni Boccaccio's famous women, the Chronicon of Adam of Usk. Dozens of medieval texts written by monks and scholars describing Pope Joan as historical fact. For 600 years, from the 13th to the 19th century, many educated Europeans believed Pope Joan was real, believed a woman had been pope. Some Protestant reformers used the story as anti-Catholic propaganda, but even Catholics believed it for centuries. There are references to the pierced chair. There are claims about avoided procession routes. There's the chronological confusion in the list of popes that some argue resulted from erasing Pope Joan's papacy. The story was persistent, widespread believed, but here's the evidence against Pope Joan. There's no contemporary source. None. The earliest mention of Pope Joan comes from Jean de Mailly in the 1250s, 400 years after she supposedly lived. 4 centuries of silence. If a woman became pope, if she gave birth in a public procession, if this massive scandal rocked the church in the 850s, why did nobody write about it until 400 years later? The chronology doesn't work. We have good records of 9th century popes. We know who was pope when. There's no gap where Pope Joan fits. The succession from Leo IV to Benedict III is documented. There's no space for 2 years of female papacy. The story has all the hallmarks of legend. The brilliant disguised woman. The pregnancy revealed at the worst possible moment. The dramatic public exposure. It's too perfect, too narratively satisfying. It feels like a morality tale, not history. And the story emerges just when anti-papal sentiment was growing in medieval Europe. When critics wanted to undermine papal authority. When stories that embarrassed the church were politically useful. The timing is suspicious. Modern historians overwhelmingly agree. Pope Joan never existed. She's a legend. A persistent, powerful, widely believed legend, but a legend nonetheless. There was no female pope. The chronology doesn't allow it. The lack of contemporary sources is damning, and the story serves too perfectly as anti-papal propaganda to be trusted. But here's what I find fascinating. The legend of Pope Joan tells us something true, even if the events are false. It tells us about medieval anxieties about women and authority, about fears that women might infiltrate male institutions, about the fragility of patriarchal power, if it depends on external markers, clothing, beards, behavior, rather than inherent qualities. The legend reveals that medieval people could imagine a woman being so intelligent, so learned, so capable that she could fool everyone and become pope. That's actually a radical admission. The story says a woman could do this. A woman could have the intellectual capacity, could have the theological knowledge, could govern the church effectively. The legend also reveals anxieties about bodies and gender. The only thing that definitively exposes Pope Joan is pregnancy, biology. Not her mind, not her ability, not her governance, just the biological fact of pregnancy. The story suggests that without that biological marker, a woman could successfully perform papal authority. That gender is in some sense performative, that wearing the robes and speaking the words and performing the rituals might be enough. And the verification chair, whether real or legendary, reveals paranoia. The need to physically check, to verify, to make absolutely certain. It shows how threatened patriarchal authority feels when its boundaries are questioned. Subscribe to Historian Diary for more investigations into historical mysteries and scandals. Write in the comments, what other controversial medieval stories should I investigate? So here's my conclusion. Pope Joan never existed as a historical person. But Pope Joan absolutely exists as a cultural phenomenon, as a legend that reveals medieval anxieties and fantasies, as a story that persisted for 600 years because it touched something deep in the culture. And maybe that's more interesting than if it was simply historical fact. A true story would be one woman, one deception, one dramatic exposure. But the legend of Pope Joan is bigger than that. It's a story that traveled across medieval Europe. That was believed by monks and scholars and common people. That influenced art and literature. That created verification rituals. That changed papal procession routes, or at least people believed it did. The legend is about the fear that women might infiltrate male power, the fantasy that they could succeed if they tried. The anxiety that the markers of authority, clothing, rituals, titles, might be performance rather than essential truth. Pope Joan never sat on St. Peter's throne, but the idea of Pope Joan sat in medieval minds for centuries, and that idea was powerful, threatening, fascinating, persistent. Thank you for watching Historian Diary. This is history, or rather this is legend. But sometimes the legends we create reveal more truth about our fears and desires than the facts ever could. Pope Joan, the woman who never was pope, but who in legend fooled everyone. Who wore the papal tiara, who celebrated Mass, who governed the church, until pregnancy exposed her in the most public, most dramatic, most undeniable way possible. The Catholic Church says it never happened. Modern historians agree, but for 600 years people believed, and that belief shaped how people thought about women, about power, about the church, about the fragility of authority. That's not history, but it's historically significant. See you next time on Historian Diary.